Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nick, and I'll be giving a brief introduction about e-waste. So, you might wonder, what is e-waste? Well, although there isn't any globally unified definition for e-waste, it generally encompasses any broken or otherwise discarded electronic or electrical device. So, this could include anything from cell phones to toasters or refrigerators. Essentially, anything that has ever had an electron flow through it in some way could be considered e-waste. So each individual generates about 5 kilograms of e-waste annually. In total, that makes more than 45 million metric tons of e-waste generated around the world each year. Now, the problem comes when we try to get rid of this e-waste. We can't just put it in a landfill. There are lots of materials, elements inside these electronic devices that are not good for the environment, as will be discussed later. So, generally, there are two ways that or two streams that e-waste can end up in: the informal and formal processing systems. So, in informal e-waste processing, this is generally done by individuals, often in developing countries, who essentially buy e-waste and try to extract valuable metals or materials from the waste that they buy. There are two ways that this is generally done. One way is by open burning. So this is when all the materials are stacked in a pile and they will be lit on fire, and everything will burn away except for the metals, which will be gathered at the end, and they will try to separate those off and sell them for a little bit of cash. Another way to do it is people will have a little kiddie pool filled with acid. You dump everything in, wait for the acid to eat away all the stuff you don't want, and again, you're left with metal at the end. So these methods pose a lot of environmental and health problems, as will be discussed further on in this presentation. But these are generally done by individuals in developing countries. There was a large problem a few years ago where essentially countries, to deal with their e-waste, would just ship everything off to developing countries and forget about it. But thankfully, in recent years, that has been outlawed by most developed countries. Anyways, the next form, or the next stream that e-waste can end up, is the formal processing stream. On a fundamental level, this uses the same processes as informal. As an example, you can process it using heat or chemical means. But in opposition to informal processing, these are done in a much more controlled environment. So example, instead of open burning, you would have a industrial incinerator with environmental controls to capture all the nasty stuff that gets burned off and keep the workers a lot more safe too. And for the chemical method, you would have much better chemical processes to refine the wanted goods out of the waste. And in general, the formal method of e-waste processing allows for much more of the valuable materials in the e-waste to be recovered. So that's a good thing. Additionally, there is much safer for the workers and the environment, as will be discussed later in the report. So finally, we'll talk about what we can do to help reduce our impact in this problem, or how we can reduce the amount of e-waste that we generate. So one way is to reduce the amount of single-use or commodity electronics that we consume. Rather than buying cheap things that we'll maybe use once or twice and then throw them out, it's generally wise to buy kind of better quality stuff that will last for a while and stuff that is serviceable. So if we buy electronics that are expected to die and then be discarded, we're just contributing to the problem. But if we have electronics or the knowledge to repair those electronics, to keep them functioning, to extend their lifetime, we can greatly decrease the amount of e-waste that we generate. So that's all I've got for you today, And now I will turn it over to my group mate Cheryl, and she'll talk about some of the health and environmental impacts of e-waste.